It is August 1996. A reporter at a mid-sized California newspaper has just published a 3-part series that will end his career, destroy his marriage, cost him his house, and 8 years later, contribute to his death. His name is Gary Webb. He works for the San Jose Mercury News. The series is called Dark Alliance. It documents with named sources and documentary evidence that a cocaine trafficking network with ties to the CIA-backed Nicaraguan Contras supplied the crack cocaine epidemic that tore through black communities in Los Angeles in the 1980s. The story is specific, the story is sourced, the story is accurate. Within months, the 3 most powerful newspapers in America will deploy more resources to destroy Gary Webb than they ever spent investigating whether he was right. To understand what Webb finds, you have to understand what the United States is doing in Nicaragua in the early 1980s. The Sandinista government, which came to power in 1979, is considered by the Reagan administration to be a Soviet-aligned communist threat in the Western Hemisphere. The CIA is authorized to fund, train, and support a counter-revolutionary force, the Contras, to destabilize and ultimately overthrow the Sandinista government. Congress, alarmed by the scope of the operation, passes the Boland Amendment in 1982, cutting off federal funding to the Contras. The CIA has a problem. It needs money for an operation it is no longer legally allowed to fund. And in Los Angeles, the crack cocaine epidemic is about to begin. Ricky Ross is 19 years old in 1979. He grows up in South Los Angeles, and by the early 1980s, he has become the largest crack cocaine distributor in the city, eventually expanding to cities across the United States. His operation moves an estimated $3 million worth of cocaine per day at its peak. His supplier is a Nicaraguan named Danilo Blandon. Blandon's supplier is Oscar Danilo Blandon's boss, a Nicaraguan named Norwin Meneses. Meneses is a known drug trafficker. He is also a CIA asset and a key fundraiser for the Contras. The DEA knows who Meneses is. The CIA knows who Meneses is. For years, neither agency moves against him. The cocaine keeps flowing, the crack epidemic spreads, and in Washington, the Contra operation keeps running. Webb does not stumble onto this story. He is handed a thread by a woman named Coral Barker, the girlfriend of a man being prosecuted on drug charges in San Jose, who tells Webb that her boyfriend's supplier has connections to the CIA. Webb pulls the thread for a year. He obtains court documents. He interviews Blandon, who is now cooperating with federal prosecutors and speaks on record. He interviews Ricky Ross in prison. He obtains DEA reports. He finds a 1986 memo from the Justice Department's own Inspector General, acknowledging that the CIA had requested and received a formal exemption from the legal requirement to report drug trafficking by its assets to the DEA. The exemption is in writing. It covers the entire period of the Contra operation. Webb has the document. He publishes. Dark Alliance runs in the San Jose Mercury News in August 1996. It is also published on the paper's website, making it one of the first major investigative series to break online. The response from the public is immediate and enormous. In black communities across Los Angeles and beyond, the story confirms what many people have believed for years, that the crack epidemic was not an accident, that it had architects, that the government knew. Congressman Maxine Waters calls for a congressional investigation. The CIA director, John Deutsch, is forced to attend a town hall in Los Angeles where he faces hundreds of furious residents demanding answers. Webb's story is the most read piece of journalism in the San Jose Mercury News' history, and then the papers come for him. The Los Angeles Times response to Dark Alliance is not an investigation, it is a project. The paper assigns 17 reporters to examine Webb's story, not to follow the leads, not to interview Blandon or Meneses or the DEA agents whose reports Webb has cited, to find what is wrong with Webb's reporting. The Washington Post and the New York Times published their own pieces. All three papers reached the same conclusion. Webb has overstated the CIA's involvement. His sourcing is thin, and the story does not hold up. The pieces are published within weeks of each other. They are devastating, and they have a specific effect that goes beyond correcting the record. They give the CIA, the Justice Department, and every other federal agency named in Webb's reporting a way to close the story without investigating it. The San Jose Mercury news buckles. In May 1997, executive editor Jerry Ceppos publishes a column acknowledging that the series had shortcomings. He does not retract it. He does not say it is wrong. He says it did not meet the paper's standards in some areas. The column is treated by Webb's critics as a full retraction. It is not. But the distinction does not matter in practice. Webb is removed from his position and offered a transfer to a suburban bureau covering local meetings. He resigns. He is 49 years old. He has just published what will eventually be confirmed as one of the most important pieces of investigative journalism of the decade. His career is over. While the newspapers are dismantling Webb's reputation, the investigations he called for are producing results he does not yet know about. The CIA's Inspector General, Frederick Hitz, opens an internal investigation in 1996. The investigation runs for 2 years. It examines 900 individuals and produces a report of approximately 400 pages. In October 1998, Frederick Hitz releases the report. The report confirms that the CIA knew its Contra allies were trafficking cocaine into the United States. It confirms that the agency did not report this to law enforcement as required. It confirms that individual CIA officers had direct contact with drug traffickers. It confirms that the legal exemption Webb had found was real and had been in operation throughout the Contra program. The report confirms the core of everything Gary Webb reported in 1996. The CIA Inspector General's report is released on a Friday afternoon in October 1998. It lands between the release of the Starr Report, which documents President Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and the congressional midterm elections. The news cycle has no room for it. The Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, the three papers that assigned significant resources to discrediting Webb 2 years earlier, give the CIA Inspector General's report minimal coverage. There is no correction of their 1996 pieces. There is no acknowledgement that Webb's core findings have been confirmed by the CIA's own internal investigation. The report is filed and the story ends, and Gary Webb is still out of a job. The years between 1997 and 2004 are documented in Webb's own correspondence and in accounts from people who knew him. He struggles to find work in journalism. He is turned down by multiple outlets. His marriage ends. He loses his house. He eventually finds work as an investigative reporter for a small Sacramento newspaper, the Sacramento News and Review, where he continues reporting. He publishes a book, Dark Alliance, in 1998, expanding his original series with additional documentation. The book is reviewed respectfully in some quarters and ignored in others. He gives talks. He maintains that his reporting was accurate. He watches the CIA Inspector General's report confirm his findings and receive almost no coverage. He is, in the language of the industry that destroyed him, unhireable. On December 10th, 2004, Gary Webb is found dead in his Sacramento apartment. He is 49 years old. He has left notes for his family. He has left his house keys in an envelope for the movers because he has been evicted and is moving out. The Sacramento County coroner examines the body and rules the death a suicide. The cause of death is 2 gunshot wounds to the head. This fact, 2 gunshot wounds, is reported in the initial coverage and then largely disappears from subsequent accounts. The coroner states that it is possible, if rare, for a person to survive a first gunshot wound to the head and fire a second. This is the official record. It is what the documents say. It is the finding that stands. The people who knew Webb do not all accept the ruling. His ex-wife, his colleagues at the Sacramento News and Review, and journalists who had followed his work speak publicly about his state of mind in the weeks before his death. The accounts are not consistent. Some describe a man who was depressed and professionally destroyed. Others describe a man who is still working, still reporting, still fighting. What is documented in his own correspondence and in accounts from his editor at the Sacramento paper is that Webb had recently been told the paper could no longer afford to keep him. He had lost his house. He was moving into his mother's home. He was 49 years old, and he had nowhere left to go in the profession he had spent his life in. Webb's death produces a response that his CIA story never received from the mainstream press. Obituaries run in papers across the country. The Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, and the New York Times all publish obituaries. The obituaries acknowledge his work on Dark Alliance. Some acknowledge that subsequent government investigations confirmed elements of his reporting. None of them run corrections of the 1996 pieces that helped end his career. None of them name the 17 reporters the Los Angeles Times assigned to discredit him. The obituaries are respectful. They are also 8 years too late. Declassified records from the CIA Inspector General's investigation, released under the Freedom of Information Act in subsequent years, continue to add detail to what Webb first reported. The story keeps being confirmed. The correction never comes. John Deutsch is the CIA director who faces the Los Angeles Town Hall in 1996. He is forced out of the CIA in 1997 and later has his security clearances revoked after it is discovered he stored classified materials on an unsecured home computer. He is pardoned by President Clinton in the final hours of his administration in January 2001. He becomes a professor at MIT. Frederick Hitz, the Inspector General whose report confirmed Webb's core findings, retires from the CIA and becomes a visiting professor at Princeton and the University of Virginia. He writes a book about CIA ethics. Jerry Ceppos, the San Jose Mercury news editor who published the column acknowledging shortcomings in Webb's series, receives the Journalism Ethics Award from the Society of Professional Journalists in 1997, the same year Webb is forced out of the paper. The award cites his handling of the Dark Alliance controversy. The Kerry Committee report is a document that exists and is rarely mentioned in accounts of the Contra drug story. In 1989, the Senate Subcommittee on Terrorism, Narcotics and International Operations, chaired by Senator John Kerry, publishes a report concluding that U.S. government agencies and officials facilitated drug trafficking by Contra networks, that drug traffickers received payments from U.S. government funds, and that federal prosecutors and the DEA had in some cases been discouraged from pursuing Contra-connected drug cases. The report is published in 1989, 7 years before Webb's series. It receives almost no coverage. It is not cited by the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, or the New York Times in their 1996 pieces attacking Webb. It is in the public record. It has been there since 1989. The full documentary record of the CIA and Contra drug trafficking, the Kerry Committee report, the CIA Inspector General's report, the DEA files, the court records from the Blandon and Meneses prosecutions, the Justice Department exemption memo Webb obtained, sits in the public archive. It has been there for decades. It confirms that a government agency, operating under legal exemption it obtained for itself, allowed its assets to traffic cocaine into American cities during a period when those cities were being destroyed by a crack epidemic. It confirms that when a journalist documented this with primary sources, the most powerful media organizations in the country worked to destroy him rather than follow the story. It confirms that when the government's own investigation confirmed his findings, the news cycle was otherwise occupied. Gary Webb's notes are in the archive too, his clips, his source documents, the book he published after they took his job, the story he kept reporting from a small Sacramento paper because it was the only place that would have him. The 2 gunshot wounds are in the coroner's report. The coroner's report is public. It has been there since 2004. The question it leaves open is not whether the ruling is correct. The question is whether anyone with the resources to answer that question has ever seriously tried. This file is now unsealed. The vault has more. Subscribe and you'll be there when the next one opens.